I just saw what could have been one of the greatest films ever made. It's too early to say, but I'm very satisfied because it deals with a subject that I care so dearly about, and I often talk about to my friends and family, much to their annoyance. Censor, it's called. Prano Bailey Bond's debut film. I wish I knew a lot more about her work, but now I do. Essentially, it follows the story of a young woman named Enid who works for a sort of entity known like the BBFC, but they can't say probably for legal reasons, as she tries to censor all the films and classify them and recommend cuts and excise a few things, only to find out in later time that moves on forward. So I'm a little bit nervous right now because I can't just believe what I just saw right now. It's been a while seeing a film about a subject about film censorship that ultimately leads her to explore this culture of video Nazis that's within her presence, and she believes it may be the result of her disappearance of her sister that she didn't know so long ago. Everything is to be believed or to be seen is up to debate. Maybe this could be a case study of the psychological effects it does to people in terms of showing extreme graphic violence, sexual violence, what it can do to the psyche. Very similar to Videodrome, done back in the early 80s. A great film that's very similar to this movie in regards, and or a sign of her mental illness. It's up for you to decide there. But I think the overall charm of the film is the fact that it deals with the subject of film censorship, which is not something that I often see very often. There aren't that very many films that deal with that particular subject. The ones I can think of particularly come to mind are This Film's Not Yet Rated, the documentary, Fuck, which is another documentary, but that deals particularly with the F word and the history of censorship on profanity, and South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, an adult animation that when it first came out, I was too young to see, but I really wanted to see so badly because it was animated. But I wasn't 15 at the time, so, what are you going to do? But I finally, got there in the end. I finally saw it, but I won't tell you what my age is, but I am in that late 20s, early 30s bracket. So I do know some of the things that she is referring to because I did exist within that era when James Furman was still head of the BBFC and was controlling the strings in regards to what you can or cannot show. He still had a conservative government under John Major. I wasn't quite around when Thatcher was around, but I'm sure she was a little terror of her own. Everything that I see about her is overwhelmingly negative. I can only imagine what Britain wouldn't have been like around like 1985, 1986. Ooh, gives me the chills. Especially if you were from the north of England, you would have been royally fucked in the arse. And that's where censor's strength belongs. And I'm very happy and ecstatic to see that they finally made a movie about a subject that I care so dearly about. And I know quite a bit about because I actually have been to the BBFC offices on Soho Square, W1, I believe, a W1 postal code. When I was going through Tottenham Court Road, when I was travelling on the train on Virgin Trains, that was back in June 2013. I saw Ian, I saw Lucy Brett. I didn't see Catherine Anderson or Quentin Thomas, Dave Kirk or David Alston, but I wish I did because that was one of the best moments of my life, getting to see how they do their magic. Whether you like them or not, there's so much to explore, especially if you're someone who's a film enthusiast like myself, who's created this channel to talk about these particular issues, who's even made a film reel of cinema adverts that I believe, and I put the little UPG 12, A15, 18 certificates imposed on them through Photoshop or Adobe Premiere, and has even posted videos about the new changes in policy that they were doing for the new guidelines every 5 years. And also, one particular video where I was talking to David Austin, and they featured my tweet on a podcast, who's at Skinny Ebert, before it became Skinny E Media, discussing about why the 18 certificate hasn't been quite as popular as it used to be. So really, there was a lot to talk about this particular film and its subject matter. The elements surrounding the disappearance of Enid's sister. Enid is played by Nerv Arga, Niamh. It's a little difficult to pronounce because it's in Gaelic, but I have heard that name before. Very pretty one as well. I think the strength is that, but the disappearance of his sister, it has very interesting moments, and if you're someone who can relate to that, good for you. But I think the film censorship element was definitely the strongest element about that particular narrative, and I would like to sort of open and crack it inside Miss Bailey Bond's head to see what is going on as she wrote this particular script with, I believe, Anthony Fletcher, and what she talked about in regards to the BBFC, but they couldn't legally say, I'm presuming, or if they went to do research and went to Soho Square, or even Skype them because we're in a pandemic, to discuss how they managed to whittle through the cracks and the culture that was surrounding in that era with Thatcherism and Mary Whitehouse and her Festival of Light and the economic and social concerns that plagued the 1980s. Many films have been dealt about it. Many films have explored it. Just recently, Creation Stories was another film that touched on the demise of the manufacturing industry and the sort of willingness to explore art and music as it comes in the 80s and the 90s in Scotland and even in the north of England. And then also Blinded by the Light, which came out about two or so years ago. That was through a South Asian perspective set in Luton about racism and unemployment and finding a purpose even in the darkest of times. And I know we are in a very dark time that we are in, even if film censorship is not as important as it is back it was in the 80s. But you are seeing what is less of a concern of if it's suitable for 15 or an 18, and more in regards to the safety of children on the internet, as they're using Netflix and Prime Video, if they're looking inappropriate videos on YouTube, even if it has a kids filter, and what big tech is promoting to impressionable people about far right ideology or the far left, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot to talk about. And I think by taking it through that 1980s perspective, it may seem a bit of a niche matter, but you can take it right now and put it into the context of a person that has seen so much propaganda videos from ISIS or the KKK and the White Alliance, and you could say the same thing. I think this is a wonderful film, and it has to be seen by as many people as it can. But be warned, it is very graphic. Now, it is a little bit toned down as far as elements related to sexual violence, because this is a film directed by a female director, so you're not going to find anything exploited for that matter. But in terms of the violence and gore it depicts, it is definitely filmed within a context of its own, but probably still strong enough to probably earn an 18 certificate. And in the US, I'm sure it might even be threatened with the NC-17, but they probably will release it unrated, so they'll save themselves the trouble. I actually saw this film not at the cinema, as you can see. I saw it at the San Francisco Film Festival online. They had a streaming link, and I paid roughly the US equivalent of $13.50 to watch this film because I heard so much about it, because I read an oddly enough, I actually heard about this film through a Variety article, unbeknownst to me, that there was a film that dealt with this particular subject in general. And I was so happy to see that this film actually even existed. This wasn't just in my imagination. This wasn't South Park Big Along with Uncut 2, or this film's not yet rated, or fuck. This was actually something that existed. And Kermo's been talking about it for countless number of videos on his film reviews, even if it's a film that's not necessarily 18 level. He'll even talk about it for films that are even at the PG and 12 and 15 levels as well, which definitely piqued my curiosity. And I believe he also presented the documentary for Last Days of the Board, which is a very interesting one. I'm sure Miss Bailey Bond probably even saw this as well, called Last Days of the Board. It aired on 4 back in 1999. It talked about the last days of James Furman and the transition he was making from him to Robin Duvall. I wish I could talk more, and I hope you would be interested in discussing Censor even further, because this is a movie that definitely astounded me. I have a lot to say about this one. I'm sure it'll definitely rank high in the rankings this year alongside Creation Stories and American Skin. Or it just might even, for that matter, be the #1 film of the year, being out Space Jam New Legacy. But we'll see how that turns out. That's a piece of nostalgia for me, even if it's not necessarily tied to film ratings. But everything's tied to film ratings to me. I can even classify the snacks. I could classify the hand sanitizer or the mask. This will get a U certificate. No enough material likely to offend or harm. Oh, it brings me back to the days of the VSC indicators with Simon Bates, where you found on the Warner Brothers video saying, to understand what the film is like, you can look at the certificate it has been given. This film has been classified PG. It stands for parental guidance. It means that parents may wish to check the film before showing it to their children. Blah, 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 blah. So, in return, because I'm probably yarning on right now, I'm probably going to play a little song here that will definitely catch Bailey Bond or Nev Algar and all the other team, including Danny Lee Winter, who kind of looks a little like me, in the film, playing one of the censors. I thought, wait, did they get me? Or did Ian and Lucy tell them, "I'll get get someone who looks like the guy who does Skinny Ebert. I won't name what my name is, and make him into a character." I just thought that was a little bit surreal. So in return, I'm going to play this particular song because I think it would be very amusing if I can find it. Alan Moore was Star Fun. And a side note, here's Coldplay, but I want to talk about my favourite subject in the world. Film ratings! Aboriginal events to favour a political party. Bleached on rap and metal songs for the lyrics. This is the work of the censor. Oh yeah! I wanted to become a censor for as long as I can remember. Telling people that you can or cannot watch. I actually made this song about 2 years ago. Below that age, and my mother was like for many kids who wish they'd become an astronaut. Groovy, ain't it? But it would not be fitting for the film. It's a lot more dark and serious than this. This is jokey. I won't even show you clips of South Park. A show I want to see so bad. I hate you, so warm me mind. I'll send a personal link for everyone who's seen this video at a later point. Stay tuned. Skinny Ebert signing off.